Hello and welcome. My name's Rich and I'm a product analyst and expat Kiwi with And Digital. Since joining And, I've worked with British Airways and Lloyd's Banking Group in various product roles. I'm also a member of our Social Ethics and Inclusion Committee. Prior to And, I worked in product and digital marketing roles for an eclectic mix of organisations in New Zealand, including UNICEF, the Office Depot Group, and a product design agency. I'm a graduate of Victoria University with a Bachelor of Arts majoring in Political Science and International Relations, and Massey University with a Bachelor of Business Studies majoring in Communications. Why did I mention this? Well, I'm not your typical tech product person, and these degrees should give you a bit of insight into how my mind works and why I'm here talking about ethics. But before we carry on, as a speaker, I really need your engagement. I feed off the crowd. However, I'm sat in my office on my own with only your lovely thumbnails for company. So in the absence of doing this like we did in previous decades, if you could hit me up with your Zoom reactions, perhaps a thumbs up if you agree with something I say, or a little clap if you think I've landed some truth. Sadly for the haters, there isn't a quick reaction that's negative, which means you can't thumbs down my mustache. So speaking of the haters, at And Digital, we want to offer a positive and safe environment for all of our event attendees. Just like we believe that more diverse teams build better products, we know that diverse representation of events ultimately creates a stronger community. So thanks for helping make this a welcoming, friendly group for all. And so here are the terms and conditions, and I'm not going to read them out in a speedy voice like the end of an advert, but if you could please stay on mute during the talk, and we are going to be recording the session, which has actually already started. So if you don't want to be seen, please do turn off your camera. And if you could type your questions into the chat box, I'll answer them at the end. And if you do need to dash at 11:45 on the dot, that's totally fine, but we may overrun by a couple of minutes. And now for a word from our sponsors. At And Digital, we accelerate the development of world-class digital capabilities. We work with your people to build great digital products faster and help develop the capabilities you need to thrive tomorrow. If you're looking for a new partner, please do get in touch with us and use the code ETHICSRULES on our website to get a free umbrella with your first purchase. We also help unlock value faster across each stage of your digital journey. Our expert support will guide you on how to tackle your toughest digital questions with a drive towards action. We'll work with you as a joint team to build great digital products faster. We'll also upskill and develop your talented people for long-term and sustainable results. Pretty nifty, huh? Oh, and we are hiring. We're back into growth mode as we support our new and current clients. If you're based in the UK, like the look of what we do, and you're experienced in the types of roles listed on screen, please do follow the link to our website or scan the QR code, which will take you to the exact same place without the thrill of doing it in a complicated way. So that ends the messages from our sponsors and the ground rules for engagement. Let us begin. Technology has an ethics problem. I believe that as a society, we're waking up to the impact of technology on our lives. And it started with this guy, a young Mark Zuckerberg. He brought us Facebook, which was the winner of the 2000 social media wars, beating out MySpace and Bebo. Facebook was amazing. It was the biggest evolution of peer-to-peer communication since the invention of email. We could search for people, connect with them, and immediately begin talking to them. Prior to Facebook, you'd need to ask around for someone's details if you didn't have them. And if you did manage to find them, you'd have to make a phone call or send them an email to reconnect. Given the effort involved, you'd only really do this for people in your inner circle. Through the power of Facebook, you can now connect with your crush from 10 years ago. What could possibly go wrong? And it then exploded with this guy, the late great Steve Jobs, here in 2007, debuting the original iPhone. This was the moment when the smartphone really arrived, providing incredible advances in touchscreen technology paired with an innate understanding of how people work. The iPhone rapidly became the new standard of excellence for mobile phones. Google responded by releasing the Android operating system, enabling innovative hardware providers to build on it, such as Samsung, Huawei, and of course, Google themselves. All of a sudden, we have devices in our pockets connected to the internet, enabling a new wave of innovation. In late 2009, Uber burst onto the scene. Through their app, at the push of a button, you can now have a car and a driver appear at your location while you track its progress to you in real time. When you then arrive at your destination, you simply get out of the car and close the door. The cost of the fare is then automatically charged to your card. Now, this felt like magic compared to calling a cab company and waiting in the dark with no idea when they'd arrive. and then asking the driver to stop at an ATM on the way home to get some cash out. And on a deeper note, on December 17th, 2010, a 26-year-old Mohamed Bouazizi lit himself on fire in front of a government building in Tunisia in protest of government harassment. This young man's actions were filmed on mobile phones and shared across social media. Mohammed's sacrifice would become known as the action that initiated the Arab Spring protest movement, resulting in multiple regime changes throughout the region. Fast forward though to the year 2016. This was the year we went from celebrating the use of social media to topple authoritarian strongmen to lamenting social media's ability to elect them. And I'm yet to forgive Benedict for this one. On June 23, 2016, Britain shocked the world with the results of the Brexit referendum, with the Leave vote narrowly winning. But don't worry, I still love Benedict. If you haven't seen the Channel 4 movie Brexit, The Uncivil War, I would highly recommend it. Benedict Cumberbatch plays the eccentric Dominic Cummings, chief architect of the Leave campaign, and he plays the role very well. And then November 9th, 2016, Donald Trump defeats Hillary Clinton, fulfilling the great Simpsons prophecy from the year 2000. But something seemed off about these results, and it was. On March 17th, 2018, the New York Times and Guardian published the news that Cambridge Analytica had harvested data from Facebook users, and crucially from those Facebook users' friends. It started when several 100,000 Facebook users were paid to answer a series of questions via a Facebook app called This Is Your Digital Life. These users were unaware that they were passing on their friends' information too. Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign utilized the harvested data to build psychographic profiles, determining users' personality traits based on their Facebook activity. The campaign team used this information as a micro-targeting technique, displaying customized messages about Trump to different US voters on various digital platforms. Ads were segmented into different categories, mainly based on whether individuals were Trump supporters or potential swing voters. Supporters of Donald Trump received triumphant visuals of him, as well as information regarding polling stations. Swing voters were instead shown images of Trump's more notable supporters and negative graphics or ideas about his opponent, Hillary Clinton. So there are some obvious red flags in here, but am I the only one not a little bit impressed? To have the vision to not only exploit Facebook in this way, but to then leverage this data against the very platform that supplied it, and in doing so, influence the outcome of the world's most closely watched democratic elections is a special kind of genius. The links between Cambridge Analytica and Brexit have not been as strongly verified, but there is a heck of a lot of similar looking smoke between Brexit and Trump's election. So sorry, one moment. The key takeaway here is that Facebook and other social networks have been turned into tools for disinformation, directly impacting the course of world events. Scary, huh? And over the past few years, Uber and other ride-sharing platforms have come under increased scrutiny for how they pay their drivers. Uber has steadily increased their percentage of commission deducted from drivers' fares, while the rise of ride-sharing competitors have kept fare prices low for consumers, meaning drivers are being squeezed at both ends of the equation. Not only do these low fares undercut traditional taxi companies, but their drivers are all classed as independent contractors, meaning they miss out on a number of benefits compared to those in full-time employment. This is a huge deal in the US, as these drivers don't earn enough to make a living wage and are unable to afford to take sick leave or holiday, which is normally covered by the benefits on offer to full-time employees. COVID has highlighted how critical this is, with drivers choosing between their health or getting paid. Recently, the state of California attempted to force all gig workers, a category which includes ride-sharing drivers, to be recategorized as employees, ensuring they're treated fairly. Uber, Lyft, and others combined to advocate for special dispensation, which led to the state holding a referendum to enable ride-sharing companies and delivery drivers to be excluded from the legislative protections. These same companies then spent tens of millions of dollars running, you guessed it, Facebook ads during the referendum to convince Californians to vote for their drivers to be excluded from these legislative protections. Sadly, the ride-sharing companies were successful, but the drivers are now at least guaranteed some minimum income levels and basic health insurance. So aside from the bigger societal impacts technology is having, it's touching each of us on a daily basis as our attention is increasingly competed for. Common hooks like gamification, the colors of notification, and the endless feeds of content are all built on the same psychological principles used in slot machines. In April of this year, The Atlantic had this to say on the subject. The new powers in the digital age have built their business models on strategies enabled and turbocharged by self-improving algorithms that actively undermine the principles that make capitalism a good deal for most people. Their aim is not merely to gain and retain customers, but to create a dependency on their products. The buzzes, badges, and streaks of social media, the personalized deals of e-commerce sites, the camaraderie and thrilling competition of gaming, the algorithmic precision of recommendations on YouTube, all have been finely tuned to keep us coming back for more. And we are. The average person taps, types, swipes, and clicks on their smartphone 2,617 times a day. 93% of people sleep with their devices within arm's reach. 75% of them use them in the bathroom. I believe that as a society, we're not only questioning how technology gets made, but whether it's even worth using technology in the ways we have been anymore. So what does this mean for me? What does any of this actually matter for those of us working on products that don't touch billions of users? I believe that as the world continues to wake up to the impact of technology on our lives, our customers will begin to hold our digital products to higher standards. So can you give me a quick thumbs up if you've seen this movie? Okay, I see a few of you have. So for those who haven't, The Social Dilemma is a documentary on Netflix that outlines the harm that technology is causing society today. The documentary interviews a number of leading product people who were involved in influential decisions at organizations like Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. The key thing for us as product managers isn't so much the confessions, but to realize that behind the ethical failings of the technology companies I've talked to you about today was a product manager who prioritized building those features. Kenneth Bowles put it more bluntly at the Mind the Product conference last week. Product managers are the primary cause of ethical harm in the tech industry. It's heavy, but it's true. Ethics in product management is about bringing to light the downstream impact that our decisions can have on our users' lives. As product people, we make decisions each day which directly impact our users. When we decide to introduce gamification within our app to drive engagement, are we offering our customers any meaningful value, or are we leveraging the same techniques used by slot machines to hit our OKRs? As product managers, we need to be cognizant of the downstream impact we have on our customers. As I've become more cognizant of the ramifications of the decisions I've made, I've become more convinced that this is a problem that needs solving, not just for me, but for all product managers and product teams out there. And being a product person, I couldn't help but formulate this into a problem statement. How might we build products in an ethical way? And by the way, if you're not using the phrase, how might we, in your problem definitions, I would strongly recommend you do some reading into this technique, as it is a personal favorite of mine. So how might we build products in an ethical way? Well, we could give our teams an ethical mandate to ensure that ethics is at the core of how we build our products. We could form diverse product teams that unlock the power of diverse thinking. We could use an ethical product stack to identify strategic interventions and inform future requirements. We could put it in reverse, giving ourselves permission to retire features and products whose ethics are questionable. And we could review the impact our suppliers have on our ethics of our products too. So those are my 5 tips. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you next time. No, it's a good thing you're all on mute, as I don't think anyone would actually be laughing at that. Let's get into these in a bit more detail, eh? So how might we empower product teams to build ethically? So we've all probably come across this diagram, right? The champions of innovation at IDEO propose these 3 concepts of feasibility, desirability, and viability as a way to assess whether or not your new business or product is likely to be a success. But what if we added a 4th? Product ethicist James Linden proposes adding integrity into the mix like so. If we want to get ethics onto the agenda of our product teams, we need to give them a mandate to consider it. This means specifically challenging our product teams to consider ethics in our product strategy and in our product design. We can do this by expanding our definition of product success, by incorporating models like this into our evaluation of features. We can do this by asking questions of ourselves, like what impact does this feature have on our users? We can do this by incorporating qualitative measures of success, such as the well-being of our users in our OKRs. And yes, I am going to reference Jurassic Park. To paraphrase the great Dr. Ian Malcolm, your product managers were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. An ethical mandate is about expanding the conversation from could we build it to could we and should we build it. My colleague and friend James French spoke at the last Elevenses series event on unlocking the power of diversity for better products. James referenced the book Rebel Ideas by Matthew Say, and in particular, an experiment whereby homogenous teams were compared to diverse teams tasked with solving a problem. In that research, homogenous teams found collaboration easy, were extremely confident in their solution, yet they only solved problems 54% of the time. The diverse teams found collaboration difficult, they weren't as confident in their solution, but they solved the problem 75% of the time. I personally found this research profound, as it highlighted how important diverse thinking is to problem solving, which is the core of what problem teams are asked to do. But also that diverse thinking doesn't just occur because you put a diverse group of people together. To unlock the true power of diverse thinking, you have to work hard to provide the right team culture and leadership to enable this. So how does this relate to ethics and product? Simply put, the more diverse thinking in your product team, the more likely you are to pick up on potential ethical challenges. I thoroughly recommend you take some time to listen to James's talk and consider whether your product teams are both diverse enough and how you could change your culture and environment to unlock the power of diverse thinking. But sadly, diverse thinking within founding teams doesn't appear to be a priority for venture capitalists, judging by how they invest. According to the pitch book NVCA Venture Monitor, a quarterly report on venture capitalism, 2019 produced the highest number of investments in founding teams, which included at least one female founder, a whopping 23.1%, while founding teams made up exclusively women was up to a huge 6.7%. That means the remaining 72.2% of founding teams that secured VC funding in 2019 were all male. And this was the best gender balance we'd achieved yet. It gets worse. According to RateMyInvestor.com's report into the diversity of VC funding in the US, only 1% of VC-backed founders are Black, and not even 2% are Latinx. VC funding has been the gasoline to the fire of technology, yet we're consistently funding white men to build the very platforms whose impact on society are now being called into question. Perhaps if venture capitalists invested in a more diverse group of founders, they might find a way to profit from the solutions to the problems their current investments have created. I mentioned James Linden earlier, the product ethicist. Well, being a product person, he's proposed a framework or a way in which we can work through ethical products. Ta-da! Now, for the design folk on the call, I'm sorry for the jarring visuals of swapping styles midway through a presentation, but I didn't want to take anything away from James's work. This framework does exactly what I believe product ethics is about, in that it forces product teams to become aware of the real-world impacts their products may have. The framework begins by understanding the context your product operates in, before then exploring your stakeholders who are directly or indirectly impacted by your product. This is an intentional move away from the language of customers or users, which I find interesting. This subtle change of language gives a product manager permission to explore a broader audience who could be impacted by their work. The canvas then works through your values, always a good thing to do when talking ethics. But it's at this point I think some product managers may get stuck, as some companies may not have defined their values in a way that can be easily applied to product management. The last two stages work through your duties as the owner of the product and the affordances your product creates. In James's work, he references Tinder and other dating apps a lot, and they provide a clear set of affordances and duty here. So dating apps make it possible for people to connect with other people who find them physically attractive, which wasn't something you could do anywhere near as easily for those of us old enough to remember dating without the help of an app. However, with this affordant, there is now a duty of care required to ensure that with these newfound connections they're creating, they also provide their customers with a level of protection should they choose to meet. This then leads nicely into strategic interventions, which recognize the need to intervene in historic decisions and your ethical product requirements, which informs key actions required to make your product more ethical and aligned to your values. I'd recommend product teams consider using this framework at least once a quarter to surface any current or future ethical challenges. And so linked to the previous post, I want to talk about the process of undoing. If you're listening to the talk and you're starting to feel the heat a bit, and you're aware there may be some things you need to reconsider, that's perfectly normal. Coming to terms with ethics in our work requires a bit of soul searching. Personally, I struggle knowing that throughout my career, I've dedicated millions of dollars of marketing spend to Google, who have blatantly dodged taxes while decimating local advertisers, and hundreds of thousands of dollars of spending money with Facebook, whose sins I've already laid bare. However, you and I should take comfort in the knowledge that we've made these decisions based on what we believe to be right for our product, our users, and our employers. I truly believe that at the core of people and the core of our humanity is a desire to do good. We all have our moments, but we shouldn't be doubting our intentions. As more information comes to light, the question shouldn't be, what have I done? But rather, what am I going to do about it? The reality is, as more information comes to light, the more we'll need to reconsider some of our products in our entirety or just some of their features. And that's okay. It's okay to reverse the decision you've made with the knowledge you've gained, and you don't need to carry any guilt or shame for doing so. So, fifth and final point, supplier impact. As we build our products, we often do so using existing tools and technology to deliver our requirements, such as using partner technology to providing tracking and analytics, cloud-based hosting, or tools for performance monitoring. And as we grow our user base, we engage with platforms to support the acquisition and retention of our users, such as CRMs, email marketing tools, or advertising networks. The question we should be asking ourselves is whether or not these suppliers align with us on an ethical basis. I mentioned earlier about my regrets for spending money with Facebook. Ask yourself that question. Are you comfortable with the ethics of continuing to use your current advertising channels? At what point does the cost per acquisition become so good that we overlook the impact of the very platforms we're advertising on? I can't give you the answer to that question. Only you and your team can. But I would encourage you to look across your network of suppliers and ask some of these questions. Do my suppliers operate their business in a way that I'd be proud to have my logo listed on their website as a customer? What is my supplier's broader impact on society? For example, do they have a track record of diverse hires? What about their carbon footprint? Is it negative? And do they take responsibility for their impact on people? And finally, is there a comparable supplier you could be using who has a more positive impact on society? By choosing partners who are leading the way when it comes to ethics, it'll help you build an end-to-end product, and it'll ensure the success of businesses who are having a positive impact on society. So, how might we build products in an ethical way? We could provide an ethical mandate for our teams, ensuring that ethics is front of mind. We could ensure our product teams benefit from diversity of thought and that we cultivate the environment for diverse thinking to thrive. We could introduce a quarterly review of our ethical product stack, helping us to define strategic interventions to write the unethical and to find future requirements in an ethical way. We could be willing to put it in reverse in a non-judgmental way. Looking to the future, we could give ourselves permission to pull back features or retire products that we're aware are not ethically sound. And finally, we could consider the impact of our suppliers on our product and actively seek out suppliers who have a positive impact on society, not just accepting suppliers who are okay. Whoops. Hey, there we go. Thank you so much for coming along today. If you'd like to chat more, I'm going to leave my email address and LinkedIn details on the screen. And now we should have a bit of time available to questions.
Thanks, Rich. So we do have some questions. So we've had a question from Antonia that is thinking about specific features, most recently focused on Twitter classification fake news. In the most recent USA election, how could this have impacted the events of the past, like Brexit, etc.?
Can you read that again, please?
Yeah. Thinking about specific features, most recently focused on the Twitter classification of fake news. In the most recent USA election, how could this have impacted the events of the past, like Brexit, etc.?
Gotcha. Right, I'm with you. So to expand on that in a bit more detail, during the most recent election, Twitter and Facebook started tagging certain content with kind of like warning labels, in some instances blocking tweets from being seen until you'd read a disclaimer, providing more insight to users reading that content as to whether or not that information was legit or if there were kind of dubious claims. Yeah, I think this would have made a huge difference in those previous scenarios. In the context of Brexit, there was that huge number around how much money was going to come back to the NHS that was kind of put on the bus and driven around the UK, and I think that would have been a great claim to have been kind of challenged by this. And I think in previous elections, when you look at some of the claims Donald Trump was making around, say, Barack Obama's birth certificate and the whole birther theory, that would have been a great thing to have been calling out for people. Because the reality is, you know, as politicians and huge personalities like Trump are putting this information out there, people trust them implicitly. And so there's this, and this is where there's kind of this argument of how much can platforms help. But I do believe that the decisions Twitter and Facebook have been taking to flag this is a step in the right direction to at least force people to see that information at the same time that they kind of get these half-truths presented by these leaders.
Yeah, Rich, just to say, absolutely agree with you. I think also what it did for me was highlight not only the importance of ethics in products, but the power of small features to make huge differences in the way people analyze the data they see. And it was personally, I don't know whether it's been introduced before that, but the first time I saw that in practice, and it had such a significant impact, I imagine, on how people were reading his tweets or his thoughts. I found that really amazing to actually see happening in real time.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see if there's a way in which we can quantify how much of a change it made. So I'm imagining a continuum of people kind of, you know, on one end, they won't believe a word Trump says, and the other end, they won't ever not believe him. I wonder if in that middle ground, how many people started to question. And I suppose that's the group of people you're trying to convince or not convince, but trying to get that group of people to question what they're reading.
How do we reconcile our product ethical mandate with the capitalist objective of selling more? Cecilia's posed you a right one there.
Wow, cool. Is it okay if I close my laptop and run away?
No.
That is the quintessential question of our time. That is more beautifully written than anything I've said today. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think there's a wider context here that isn't specific to product, but that at a governance level for organizations, there is this growing expectations that companies take a better or more responsibility for their impact, right? And there's actually a lot of work that's coming out from the UN around these principles and how the global goals that we're setting from a UN level need to be aligned to businesses and how they run. And I'm desperately trying to remember the name of that initiative, but I did some training on it last week, conveniently. But what was really interesting about that is that essentially what they're saying is that as a society, as we start to prioritize as consumers, our decision-making against some of these ethical considerations, it will in the long run be beneficial from a capitalism perspective that people will begin to prioritize spending their money with people who are ticking the boxes. So I think there is a strong business case you can actually make to align yourself with this. And I also think the other side of it is on a practical level for product managers, you know, going to gamification or whatever techniques you're using, if ultimately that's based on kind of hacking people's humanity and trying to undermine the kind of shortcomings of how our brains work when it comes to how we respond to colors or the dopamine type hits we can encourage. Is there actually are we being creative, or are we actually just kind of following what's been put forward? So if we actually kind of excluded that as an opportunity, what could we actually really come up with? Like, we've got some brilliant engineers, designers, and product minds around the world. What if we actually challenged ourselves to not work in that way? What might we come up with to actually continue to grow our products and have them be a success?
Yeah, thanks. Indeed, I agree. And for me, it's also about bringing in the outside in perspective in, right? So create the pressure of the collective pressure. So it's not just about the single consumer choice in deciding what to buy, but is it like, can you really afford not to be ethical anymore if you want your business to survive on the long run?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a really interesting app that's come out of New Zealand that's kind of exploding at the moment called Kogo. And they're working with banks to help within their apps, within the banking app, help you track the carbon impact of your spending habits. Indeed. So I think as we start to see these sorts of things being surfaced to consumers, they will start to make decisions based on those impacts.
Yeah, thanks.
No worries.
Do you think, Rich, as well, that there is, obviously there's a development in the open money, open finance side of things? Do you think that's an ethical sign for good?
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to how you use it, right? So if we start to expose our financial information, does that enable people to take advantage of us, or does that enable people to give us a better experience? You know, I'm working on Lloyd's at the moment, and we've had some really interesting conversations around what does the future of banking look like, and how do we really build like future-proof products? And yeah, you would hope that this data is used for good, but I think that's where people need to be careful.
I guess then that would ask the question of, where does personal responsibility fit in?
Yeah, cool. I was hoping this question would come up. Yeah, personal responsibility is kind of the flip side of this argument, right? That as a product manager, you're not liable if your customers are falling for it and they're buying over and over again. It's on them. And I think I kind of agree with that to an extent, but I do think that when some of the techniques have been laid out so bare that they are specifically using our own psychology against us, that's where that for me is where the line is. And so if people are genuinely buying your product and more of it because you've got a great product, congratulations, amazing, you've got great product market fit. But if they keep coming back for more because they're now hooked on dopamine hits, or they find themselves wanting to spend more time escaping into your content than actually engaging with people in real life, I don't know if that's necessarily okay.
Okay. Antonio's asked a question. It's kind of on the same as the capitalist objective, but how do we get the buy-in with big business and leads into the value and importance of using the ethical product framework?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think I will put this in the slides afterwards. This is what we need with regards to this UN information around how they are positioning the wider societal impact from a governance perspective, because I think that for me is the basis of it, right? It's ultimately about showing what sort of a business case can we construct that shows the way that society is heading, the way consumer demand is heading, and then start to predict what that means for our bottom line. So ultimately, you know, our leaders of these organizations are beholden to shareholders who are expecting a return that's how our capitalist model works. So if we can find a way to link those up, I think that's going to be how we build the case, really.
Okay. James has asked, you talked about the notion of consumers being increasingly aware of the ethical implications of big business. However, with companies like Amazon being more successful than ever, how far away from that tipping point of consumers valuing integrity over convenience do you think we are?
It's a good question. I had a slide in there where I was going to go on a bit of a ramble about Amazon, but there's so many different avenues to go down. I didn't really know how to focus it. Yeah, Amazon's a really interesting one, and it's one I struggle with. You know, the carbon impact of me no longer walking down to my local shop and having 6 boxes arrive over the course of a week. I've got huge question marks around that, and it's convenience that's driving my decision making, and I'm blatantly aware of it. I think the Amazon problem, I think, stems back to how we allow businesses to grow. So Amazon spent many years being incredibly unprofitable. They intentionally undercut local businesses to gain market share. And it's only been over the last, 3 or 4 years that they've actually really started to become profitable, especially as they've started to convert some of their expense lines into their own business units, like Amazon Web Services, and like they're about to do with logistics and courier companies. And that, for me, the challenge there is that they've always had an unfair advantage because they've essentially had venture capitalists funding them to run at a loss to then wipe out their competitors. So the whole concept for me feels anti-competitive, because if you're a retailer and you are competing against someone who can effectively lose money, and you can't afford to lose money, like you've lost the fight. It's really, and it's not that, for me, wasn't about innovation. You know, Amazon's innovations around logistics and enabling e-commerce is fantastic, and I applaud them for that. But the business model side of it, I think, is where the ethics were a bit dodgy. But so sorry, there's the ramble. So going back to the core question of like, how far away are we from it? I think what we need is more and more information coming out about the impact. So I look at the carbon issue, right? And so if Kogo is embedded into my Monzo and is telling me that every time I shop with Amazon, my carbon footprint is going up quite a bit. Whereas if I walk down to my local shop to buy my replacement rubbish bin, then as a result, I'm hopefully going to start to see the actual impact I'm having. And then if you start to also realize that potentially some of the pricing isn't quite as good as you want, that might start to also bring it to light as well. The flip side of this as well is we also kind of need to get past COVID. I feel like this has been the year of convenience, right? We've all found ourselves in a really difficult spot. We're working from home. We haven't necessarily been allowed to leave the house, and Amazon's played a really good role in that. But I hope going forward, as we can start getting back out and about, we will start to have people becoming more aware of these impacts. But I don't know when is the answer. I can't give you an oracle moment on that.
Antonio, I've heard it discussed in podcasts and wondered, do you think there's space for us to rethink and completely rewrite some of these big platforms, e.g. building an ethical Twitter from scratch, getting big influencers to switch and go from there? I guess that would mean, would normal Twitter go to the dark web then?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think this is where the work that Inrupt and Tim Berners-Lee are trying to have a go at, right? And really trying to reclaim the internet for what it could be. And I applaud that. I think that's a great initiative. I would love to see it happen. I've often sat there and considered, what would I want an ideal social platform to look like? And honestly, I'd rather pay for it than be advertised to, which I think would start to remove a lot of the challenges. And I would like to have access to content from my friends and family instead of random groups that I seem to find myself sitting in. But that said, I do also wonder the flip side of it, would people trust it properly? Has consumer trust eroded so much? And I don't know if it's because of the way Facebook algorithms now work, but I don't see a lot of benefit from Facebook connecting me to friends and family in their major life updates. I see, property investor groups, people talking about how they're going to deal with bad tenants, and Kiwis in London chat about who's going on holiday where. And I don't actually see like people I'm close with engaging anywhere near as much as they used to. So I'm not quite convinced that social could be rebuilt in a meaningful way.
I think also it comes back to the point on revenue, doesn't it? In with all best intentions, thinking about why they've kind of intrinsically built these algorithms to keep them alive and growing, it's all in a quest for revenue. So I quite like your paid for idea.
Yeah,
if that's the alternative approach to it, because it's like getting that blend of kind of what the objectives are for the business. There's
a new social network that's coming to London. I keep seeing their ads every couple of months when I'm allowed to leave the house on the tubes and stuff. I can't remember their name, but the ads are black, and I'm kind of, the writing's white. It's quite catching, like Blinked maybe, or something like that. And I'm wondering if that's going to be their differentiator, if they're going to start from that position of, we're going to charge you, but we're not going to track you. That would be the value proposition.
I guess to pull this then back into our individual and organisation responsibility, how do we know if we've got it right? Yeah,
it's a good question. I mean, you could go completely too far with this, right? And all of a sudden you've got you essentially find yourself running as a not-for-profit trying to change the world. So I think you kind of know it's right when you can work through that ethical product stack and you're finding less and less things in there that you're worried about. That as you work through your supplier lists, you actually turn around and go, we're working with some really great people. I think that's when you know you've got it right. It's not quite a binary yes/no decision. But if I was a product manager at Facebook, I'd want to have a series of features, or probably a series of strategic interventions ranked by the severity of their impact, and just continue to chip away at improving those. And hopefully as that list gets less, or at least the list is made up of things with less severe impacts, you'd probably feel like you're starting to head in the right direction.
Suraj has actually put on the chat, it's pipped.com.
That's the one, Pipped. Thank you. I've signed up for an invite, but I haven't received any information, so I can't really advocate for them as much as I'd like to yet. But they keep talking about wanting to change social, so we'll see what that means.
It's interesting. Some of their taglines in there are less noise, more substance, less fake, more insight, less chat, more conversation, less clickbait, more curation. But again, I'm intrigued to know what's the underlying revenue model there? Like, how are they making that happen? And is it just about, they're going to have their own version of what they want to curate? Or, how will we know that they're doing the right thing?
Yeah, and curation goes down a dangerous path as well, right? Like, how far do you take curation, especially if it's political content? And how can you do that in a way that is free speech without bringing in inherent bias for one way or another?
It seems to be saying that it's got personalized shopping as well. So maybe it's product recommendations and affiliate that is the revenue model.
There we go.
Yeah,
I'm trapped.
Somewhere.
We'll always find a way. I guess we're coming to the end of our time. So there's just one last question that I wanted to ask. Rich, do you actually still have a Facebook account?
The $1 million question. Yes. So I do. The main reason being is being on the other side of the world, it is the easiest way to stay in touch, not so much with your closest friends, but that kind of next circle out, those people that you might not call every week, but you still want to stay in contact with. And so I find that I probably use Facebook way less than I used to, but I find myself probably using the messaging platforms like WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger a lot more. But I do really like the idea of untethering completely. But I just haven't quite had the courage while I'm so far away from people.
I think, again, it's convenience, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Rich. That was extremely interesting. Thank you, everybody, for attending. That is actually the last of our Elevenses series. So this is something that we spun up as an immediate solution for being online and everything. So we will be releasing some new events in 2021 to replace Elevenses, but thank you to all of you. I know that a few of you have actually come to quite a few of them, so thank you all for attending. We will be sending out a copy of the slides and the recording with a feedback form. We'll live for feedback afterwards. But thank you all very much. And thank you, Rich.